Welcome to the Rosary Team Podcast. We are doing a deep dive today into a story that sits right at this incredible intersection of history, faith, and art.
It's a story that might just make you rethink some of your favorite holiday trivia facts.
I think it definitely will.
And that's really our mission in this deep dive. We're going to follow two threads that are, well, they're distinct, but they're also profoundly connected.
Okay, so what's the first one?
First, we're going to correct the timeline on the American Thanksgiving celebration, unpack its true Catholic origins, which actually predate the Plymouth story by more than half a century.
Over 50 years. Wow. And the second thread?
The second is we're exploring the magnificent artistic and spiritual legacy left by the Spanish Empire in the Americas, specifically the Viceroyalty of New Spain, and how some really cutting-edge technology is saving it for all of us.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I think we have to start with that piece of history, the one that, as you said, shifts the timeline of America's Great Day of Gratitude.
Right, so if you think about the standard American history narrative, the story always begins in 1621.
Plymouth, Massachusetts. The Pilgrims, the Wampanoag tribe, that iconic image of them sharing a harvest meal.
And that 1621 event is, of course, a crucial cultural touchstone. No one is denying that. But if you're looking for the very first documented act of religious Thanksgiving, followed by a communal meal between Europeans and native inhabitants.
On what is now U.S. soil.
On U.S. soil, exactly. Then you have to shift that timeline back, way back.
We're moving 56 years earlier and about 800 miles south. From Massachusetts down to Florida.
Precisely. The first recognized Thanksgiving took place on September 8th, 1565 in St. Augustine, Florida.
Okay, so what was the event? What happened?
A Spanish fleet, led by Don Pedro Menendez de Avilas, had just arrived. They had survived this absolutely grueling ocean voyage. And their non-negotiable first act upon landing was to celebrate a massive Thanksgiving to God.
For their safe arrival.
For their safe arrival. And crucially, it didn't stop there. The celebration wasn't just the Mass.
Right, there was a meal.
There was a meal. The ship's chaplain, Father Francisco Lopez, who then became St. Augustine's first pastor, he immediately orchestrated a communal meal, and he made it a point that the native Timucua tribe, who were there watching, be fed right alongside the Spanish settlers.
And that is the historical moment. The first Thanksgiving meal in the United States.
It is. And the menu details are so interesting because they tell a story of cultural mixing right from the very beginning.
So we're not talking turkey and cranberry sauce just yet.
Well, not from the Spanish side anyway. We often picture, the Pilgrims' venison and wildfowl. The Spanish part of the St. Augustine meal was something called cocido.
Cocido. What is that exactly?
Think of it as a really rich celebratory ship's stew. It was made from the best supplies they had just brought across the Atlantic.
So they're reserved rations.
Their most valuable rations. We're talking salted pork, garbanzo beans, hard ship's bread, and red wine. Now, the native Seloi people who joined them, they almost certainly brought local food, maybe turkey, maybe venison or squash. But the Spanish act of gratitude was rooted in sharing their most precious resources.
Which sets this incredible precedent for, fraternity rooted in faith.
And that focus, the Mass first and then the communal meal, it establishes St. Augustine not just as the first permanent European settlement in North America, but as the site of its first community act of Thanksgiving.
And you said this wasn't just a one-off thing. This is part of a larger pattern.
A very clear pattern of Catholic colonization. Just a few decades later, on April 30th, 1598, you see another one. This time it's way further west.
In Texas.
In Texas. A man named Don Juan de Oñate declared a day of solemn gratitude. And again, it was specifically to be commemorated by the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
So whether it's Florida in 1565 or Texas in 1598, the very first institutionalized acts of gratitude on this continent were just inseparable from the Eucharist.
That consistency is profound. It shows that the whole spiritual foundation of Thanksgiving was intrinsically Catholic. And, this is where it gets really fascinating because it circles all the way back to that 1621 Plymouth event.
The famous one. The one everyone learns about in grade school.
Yes. The one individual who was absolutely vital to the Pilgrims' survival, the man who orchestrated that famous meal, who spoke English, who negotiated peace. Squanto.
Right.
He was a baptized Catholic. He had been captured, taken to Europe, enslaved, and then eventually freed by Spanish Franciscans. That's how he learned English and became so familiar with the Catholic faith.
So you're saying even the iconic Puritan Thanksgiving, a distinctly Protestant celebration, was basically facilitated and managed by a man who understood this whole idea of a shared, grateful meal through a Catholic lens.
That's a marvelous way to put it. It just connects everything back to the fundamental theological meaning of the word itself.
Thanksgiving.
Because when we talk about Thanksgiving in a religious sense, we're not just talking about being grateful for a harvest. We're really talking about the Eucharist.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
break that down. Because I think for a lot of people, that connection between a holiday meal and the Mass might not be immediately obvious.
It's purely linguistic and then theological. The Greek word for Thanksgiving is Eucharistia.
Eucharistia.
Right. So when those early Spanish settlers celebrated Mass in St. Augustine, they were literally performing the great singular act of thanksgiving to God for salvation.
And that elevates the meaning of the holiday, far beyond just, the bounty of a single season.
Absolutely. It makes attending Mass the most appropriate way to truly start the day of gratitude. Bishop Anthony B. Taylor spoke about this beautifully.
What did he say?
He noted that in the Eucharist, Jesus gives us the food of the new world, the bread of eternal life. He said this food saves us far more effectively than any seasonal harvest foods, whether it was the Spanish salted pork of 1565 or the turkey we eat today. It's the ultimate Thanksgiving meal.
The bread from heaven. It really does recenter the entire holiday on the source of all gifts.
Giving God thanks, that's the core purpose. And, that spirit is captured so well in the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' prayer for Thanksgiving Day.
It's a beautiful prayer.
It is. It says, Lord, we thank you for the goodness of our people and for the spirit of justice that fills this nation. We thank you for our work and our rest, for one another and for our homes. We thank you, Lord. Accept our thanksgiving on this day.
A perfect sentiment.
Yeah.
So we've covered the historical act of faith at 1565 Mass. Now I think we need to transition to the physical legacy of that same faith.
Right. From the foundational moment of spiritual gratitude to the incredible, magnificent sacred art that it inspired.
And if you want to explore that profound artistic legacy of the Viceroyalty of New Spain, including works from some of the most famous masters of that era, you should visit rosaryteam.com today.
So the story of preserving this art, it actually begins with a crisis. Not a joyful discovery, but a crisis in Chihuahua, Mexico, just a few years ago.
A crisis. Okay.
For centuries, Chihuahua, like so many cities in what was once New Spain, held this incredible trove of sacred art. We're talking masterpieces by the heavy hitters of the era, Miguel Cabrera, José de Paz, Antonio de Torres.
Top-tier artists.
The absolute pinnacle of devotional art from the region. And this collection was housed in the Museum of the Artesaco Diocese, which was located in, of all places, the basement of the Chihuahua Cathedral.
Oh, I think I can see where this is going. A basement.
Exactly. In 2014, because of that subterranean location, severe flooding forced the museum to close. Permanently. It was a disaster that threatened to ruin irreplaceable history.
So what happened to the art?
The immediate risk was just catastrophic decay from the moisture. Thankfully, the church managed to salvage the pieces and move them to climate-controlled storage.
Okay, so they were safe.
They were safe, yes, but they essentially vanished from the public eye. They became inaccessible, scholars couldn't study them, and really heartbreakingly, the faithful couldn't draw inspiration from them. A massive piece of our shared historical archive was just locked away.
So this huge challenge, a priceless legacy that's now invisible, it demanded a really powerful modern solution.
And that's where the Museum Digital Diodo stepped in. Their whole mission was to democratize access using technology.
The idea being if people can't come to the art has to go to the people.
Via ultra-high-resolution digital imaging. And they didn't just, take a simple photograph. They pioneered a gigapixel capture method.
Gigapixel. Okay, that means 1 billion pixels per image. That sounds technically immense. What does that process actually involve?
It's incredibly meticulous work. For just about 40 of these major paintings, the team had to stitch together, this, 7,350 individual high-definition photographs.
7,000 photos for 40 paintings.
Imagine the patience, the precision, just to capture that much information and make sure every single brushstroke aligns perfectly.
That level of detail, that commitment, it changes the experience completely. When you look at these images digitally, it's not just a reproduction anymore.
No, it becomes what I'd call forensic vision. This resolution lets you see what scholars call pentimenti.
Pentimenti.
It literally means repentance or change of mind. You can actually see the small adjustments the artist made during the creation process. Maybe they moved a saint's hand just a little bit or changed the drape of a cloak.
So it's like having X-ray vision into the artist's process.
It is. You can see the individual bristles of the brush, how the glaze was layered. You can feel the artist's decision-making from centuries ago. It deepens the connection profoundly. It humanizes these masters.
But to really appreciate these masterpieces and the faith they express, you're saying we have to understand the world that produced them.
We have to understand the viceroyalty of New Spain.
It's a term we hear a lot, but maybe don't fully define. What are we talking about when we say the viceroyalty?
We're talking about this huge integrated territory governed by the Spanish crown. It stretched from modern-day Mexico all the way up through the American Southwest. And to appreciate the art, you have to get that this society saw itself as a permanent, integral part of a global empire, not some temporary outpost.
And understanding that idea of permanence is key to pushing back against a common historical narrative, the Black legend.
Precisely. The Black legend is that narrative that paints the entire Spanish presence in the Americas as uniquely cruel, uniquely exploitative, driven only by greed.
Just taking resources and leaving.
Right. But historians like Juan Miguel Zunzunegui argue that's a huge oversimplification. New Spain wasn't just a colony in our modern sense. It was an integrated empire where indigenous populations like the Quechuas and the Mayas were legally subjects of the crown. They had rights.
And the proof isn't just in legal documents. It's in the stone, the architecture.
It's tangible. Unlike other European powers who mostly just set up coastal trading posts to get goods out quickly, Spain moved inland immediately. And they poured enormous resources into building permanent, long-term societies.
Infrastructure that says we are staying. Universities, massive aqueducts, hospitals, and of course the magnificent cathedrals and altarpieces we're talking about.
It's the difference between, say, building a rental property and building a home. If you're investing a fortune in this kind of grand, long-term construction, you are showing a profound commitment. You're building a home.
And that artistic legacy, then, it reflects a much more integrated, collaborative society than the Black legend allows for.
Absolutely. The indigenous people weren't just passive recipients of this faith, they were co-builders. You can see their influence in the unique frescoes and the artistic details. It's a fusion.
So these sacred artworks are also priceless historical documents. They tell the story of this complex, faith-fueled society. And thanks to this gigapixel rescue effort, that legacy is no longer locked away.
Which brings us right back to you, the listener. Because of this monumental effort, this incredibly rich history is now available for personal devotion in a really practical way.
The primary purpose of this art was always prayer.
Right.
To draw the faithful in.
Always. And the Rosary Team collection, sacred art from the Viceroyalty of New Spain, it brings faithful, high-quality reproductions, these beautiful wood plaque icons and wall art, directly into your home.
And when you look at the themes in these rescued paintings, they really capture that intense emotional piety of the Baroque era.
You see this deep Christocentric and Marian devotion. You have powerful pieces like the Crucifixion or Jesus Prays in Gethsemane, which really speak to the suffering and sacrifice at the heart of our faith.
But you also see that unique cultural fusion.
You do. In titles like Christ the Redeemer of the New World, that title perfectly captures that deep faith being established in this very specific geographical and cultural place.
So what does this all mean for you today? It means when you choose one of these pieces for your sacred space at home, you're not just decorating. You're actually connecting your own personal devotion to that entire, vast historical narrative.
The collaboration, the artistic genius, the deep faith, a commitment that really began with that first Thanksgiving Mass back in 1565. You're linking your own daily prayer life to a monumental legacy that's been rescued from floodwaters and made accessible by, well, the power of 1 billion pixels.
It's been quite a journey. Tracing the origins of gratitude from that often forgotten 1565 Mass all the way to this massive modern effort to save the art that spiritual legacy inspired.
We really hope this deep dive adds a new layer of richness and depth to your reflection this season, and that maybe you'll remember that first historical act of gratitude rooted in the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
And on that note, we sincerely hope all of you have a very happy Thanksgiving with your family and your friends.
And if you've been moved by this story, by the art, and by the faith behind it, we truly invite you to make this unique legacy a part of your daily life and your devotion.
Visit rosaryteam.com to explore the sacred art from the Viceroyalty of New Spain collection today.
Thank you for listening to the Rosary Team Podcast.